The race to fill the Senate seat vacated by Al Franken is widely seen as among the most unpredictable in the country. After Senator Franken's resignation, Governor Dayton appointed his Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith to fill the vacancy. Smith is running to keep the seat in November. So far, the only major Republican challenger is business owner and state senator Karin Housley. Now, Professor Richard Painter, who served as an ethics attorney to President George W. Bush, announced he may run. Painter has become a staple on national cable shows with scathing critiques of President Trump. In a news conference this past week, Painter said he does not know if he would run as a Republican, Democrat, or Independent. And Professor Richard Painter joins us now. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let me ask you, you're a very smart guy. Are you going to run or not?
Well, I'm thinking about it. That is the objective of the exploratory committee, to talk to people in both political parties and to talk with independents about what the possibilities are. I do not want to run in this race unless I believe I have a very good chance of winning the race. I also want to bring ideas into the race, discuss the real issues, and have the other candidates engage in discussion about real issues, not the carping where they're going after each other, blaming each other for problems at the Department of Motor Vehicles, but focusing on the big issues that face the country and face this state.
Well, and I think the Department of Motor Vehicles, that appears to be a swipe at Representative Karin Housley, who you have talked about before on social media. She has turned out to block you, and State Senator Karin Housley. The Department of Motor Vehicles matters. That mess over there matters to a lot of people. Why isn't that important?
Well, it's blaming it on Tina Smith. I think that that really is, it's not sensible to blame that on the lieutenant governor. And there are a lot of people involved with the decisions about the Department of Motor Vehicles and the licensing.
Well, it did occur during the Dayton administration.
It's worth discussing, but the bottom line is that the debate needs to focus on the big picture issues, on the economy of this state, on safe gun laws, on foreign policy, on holding President Trump accountable. And what we can't do is get into carping at each other, criticizing candidates, just criticizing each other for things that have gone on in the past. There's our role for that, but we need to focus on big picture issues.
Okay. You're a Republican. You worked for President George W. Bush. The chair of the Republican Party said this week, the executive director of the Republican Party said, clearly Richard Painter isn't sure what he wants, and I think that speaks for itself, referring to your announcement that you're not sure if you're going to run as a Republican, a Democrat, or an Independent.
That's what I'm thinking about. If it were 20 years ago, the way the Republican Party was, I would enter a Republican primary. I've been in the Republican Party for 30 years. But I've also seen the Republican Party move dramatically to the right, particularly on social issues, and also fail to contain spending. We see President Donald Trump proposing massive infrastructure spending, and he's going to get together with Senator Chuck Schumer, and they're going to work a deal. And the question is, how much of that money is going to come to Minnesota compared with the amount of national debt that we are going to assume per capita in this state? Are we going to get a good deal out of that? We see both parties recklessly spending money and running up the debt. And I'm not sure that today's Republican Party is committed to the values of small government, fiscal conservatism, and staying out of the social issues. We don't need government telling women what to do about their decisions in pregnancy. We don't need government regulating marriage licenses. We do need to focus on gun safety. I'm pro-gun, but I'm also pro-gun safety, and we need to have some rules out there.
Anyone who watches cable television news probably has seen you. Your critiques of President Trump certainly scathing. You have 400,000 followers on Twitter. Yet I'm not sure people in this state know who you are. How do you bridge that gap?
Well, I want to talk to people in the state about the issues that matter to them, and it's mostly economic issues. We have a growing economy, and President Trump keeps crowing about how much this economy is growing and how great the tax cut was. The problem is that the tax cut almost all went to large corporations and the very, very well-to-do. Very few people in Minnesota come out on top when you consider the amount of additional national debt that we have per capita, somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000 per person. And we need a middle-class tax cut. We need to create high-paying jobs. And this economic recovery that's been going on for 5 years needs to include everybody, not just the super rich.
Well, Professor Painter, I want to thank you so much. Professor